Hi, I'm Paul Arthur. This is Bridge City News. Here's a look at some of the stories we have lined up for you tonight. Prime Minister Mark Carney meets face-to-face with China's President Xi Jinping in South Korea and calls it a turning point. Plus, Canada's highest court rules that a one-year mandatory sentence on child pornography charges is unconstitutional. We'll have reaction. And King Charles strips his brother of his title and kicks him out of his royal residence.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks for joining us. Prime Minister Mark Carney met face-to-face with Chinese President Xi Jinping Friday on the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea. Carney called the meeting a turning point for the two nations. In his remarks, Carney pointed out to Xi the two need to communicate more frequently.
As you know, this is the first formal meeting between the Canadian Prime Minister and the President of the People's Republic of China for 8 years. Distance is not the way to solve problems, not the way to serve our people with people-centric growth, as you have advocated. Pragmatic and constructive engagement is, and I welcome the momentum that has been established in recent months, meetings of our officials, meetings of ministers, and the meeting that I was able to have with Premier Li in New York.
According to officials in the Prime Minister's office, the meeting lasted roughly 40 minutes, and both leaders directed their officials to move quickly to resolve outstanding trade issues and irritants. The Alberta Federation of Agriculture says they're following this development with great interest. President Lynn Jacobson says he believes that there is optimism with the talks between Canada and China to resolve their trade disputes, and he welcomes the idea of dropping tariffs on Chinese EVs if it means China dropping their duties on Canadian canola.
We're very hopeful, and this is a good first step as we go down this road. And we've been, with tariffs and that China has happened in the past and things have cleared up. But this is a little bit more encouraging, especially since you've had this meeting. And then the Chinese invited Carney to come back for a state visit, too. In our mind, I guess it's been directly related type of thing to the EV tariffs and the tariffs on batteries, things like this, has been a direct result of, the canola tariffs that have gone on canola and pork. So, yes, I guess we would like to see the reduction. I think there's some encouraging things, and I know reading some of the press and some of the things that have gone on, they say we don't have very many cards with the Chinese. We also have to keep in mind that the Chinese need our products.
Jacobson says the immediate effect from the tariffs saw the price of canola at one point dip from an average of $14 to as low as $9 per bushel. In a recent pre-budget speech, Prime Minister Carney talked about the need for Canadians to make sacrifices going forward. But in a speech to some young people in downtown Toronto on Thursday night, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said young people have sacrificed enough. He says while the Americans have the American dream, Canada has always been about a promise.
The promise was this: you work hard, you get an affordable house. You get meat and potatoes on the dinner table every single night. When your head hits the pillow, you know that you're going to be safe as you sleep and that your car will still be in the driveway when you wake up in the morning. Powerful paychecks and stronger dollars are not just about mathematics and economics. They're about the freedom and opportunity to do the things that fulfill you and make you happy. We will be a nation not of bureaucrats and busybodies, of rulers and rule makers, of gatekeepers and grandees. Instead, we will be a nation of artists and adventurers, of entrepreneurs and explorers, a nation that celebrates warriors and workers, pioneers and patriots.
Deputy Conservative leader Melissa Lantsman implored the young people in the room to reach out to their local campus clubs and volunteer for their electoral district association. The Supreme Court of Canada has ruled that the mandatory minimum child pornography sentences are unconstitutional. The top court says the mandatory one-year jail sentences for accessing or possessing child porn removes judges' discretion to impose sentences other than imprisonment when appropriate. The decision affirms a ruling of the Quebec Court of Appeal, which said the mandatory minimum sentences violated the Charter guarantee against cruel or unusual punishment. The Court of Appeal decision came from the cases of two men who pleaded guilty to the offenses. On social media, some Canadians have reacted with words like disgusting and outrageous. Christine Cassie, CEO of the Chinook Sexual Assault Centre in Lethbridge, says while this ruling might be upsetting, there is a balance in the legal system.
I find it's always very difficult when we look at the courts, so that really they're there to protect the individual's human rights and their charter rights when it comes to those that have been accused of crimes and are going through that court system, and rightfully so. If we were on that side, we also would want our rights to be protected, which sometimes seems like it is built as an adversarial system in that way. The other side of that, though, is what are the rights for the kids, and what about the kids, and what are we doing with that? And we aren't doing enough in our society to really stop this from happening. We are behind in legislation when it comes to AI-generated images. We are behind in our safety and security when it comes to how are we taking down, like, let's say, human trafficking rings and those gross abuses that we're seeing that are happening every day to children in our country. And so I think we need to see that countering some of these decisions that are being made so that that can be brought to the public discussion as well, so that people understand just how impactful these actions are to human life, and that children also have inherent rights that exist within this country that we need to be able to keep safe and to honor.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford didn't mince words on social media. He stated, quote, "These people are predators, disgusting scumbags who prey on children, belong behind bars for the rest of their miserable lives," unquote. And Alberta Premier Danielle Smith joined in with a post on X, calling on Ottawa to invoke the notwithstanding clause to overturn the Supreme Court's ruling, saying the proposed minimum sentence is already too lenient. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court of Canada is set to decide next week whether to hear the case of the BC ostrich farm fighting to save its flock from a cull order. Universal Ostrich Farms is challenging the Canadian Food Inspection Agency's order to cull the flock after an outbreak of avian influenza was detected last December. The farm owners argue the surviving ostriches show no signs of illness and should be spared. But the CFIA insists birds that appear healthy may still spread the disease. If the High Court decides not to hear the case and lift a temporary stay, the cull would be set to proceed. But if the farm is granted leave, a final decision would come after a hearing. CFIA is currently in charge of the flock, but the owners of the farm say the animals are being neglected and improperly fed. A new Health Canada report finds Canadians generally support allowing patients who will lose their decision-making capacity to give advance consent for medically assisted death. Medical assistance in dying, or MAID, is legal for people who have serious and incurable medical conditions and are experiencing intolerable suffering. But they must be able to give consent immediately before they die. There are calls to let people with dementia give advance consent when they meet their own definition of intolerable suffering, such as not being able to recognize loved ones. However, there are concerns about the risk of coercion and undue influence on those with dementia, as well as the possibility that the patient's wishes and perspectives may change over time. Research from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is looking at how extreme weather can affect potato crops and their quality. A local scientist is aiming to identify potential problems and make informed decisions to reduce economic loss. Dr. Jonathan Nielsen's goal is to provide a risk assessment for potato growers on how heat waves and hailstorms can affect tuber size, shape, and processing quality of the potato at specific times during the growing season. His research at the Lethbridge Research and Development Centre aims to protect a grower's yields in an unpredictable climate.
Under certain conditions, potato, instead of producing like a new sprout, it'll actually kind of produce a potato on top of a potato. So this is where you can kind of get like these really weird knobs and chains and stuff like this. And those are all due to stresses that the plant is experiencing. So it's kind of going through these cycles of like, it's good to grow, things are good. Oh no, everything's terrible, stop, and it's good to grow. And so as they go through these cycles, the tuber gets these mixed messages and it starts like turning on growth that it otherwise wouldn't. If we can, figure out how to make the system more resilient to that stress, then that will lessen the amount that actually gets discarded at the fry plant because it has these physiological problems. So we're looking at how the organic matter in the soil, what the microbial community is doing, how that supports plants when these severe weather events happen. And then what growers can do to kind of promote that benefit so that it makes their system more resilient. And we're also looking at the use of biostimulants.
Dr. Nielsen says the challenge is that there might not be one single best management practice for a solution, but rather one that can navigate individual scenarios with the best recommendations. Lethbridge police have charged 4 people in connection with a robbery, with 2 of the accused also facing additional charges related to 2 separate stabbing incidents. Police say 2 of the subjects were involved in multiple offenses, including food fraud and 2 separate stabbing incidents in which both victims sustained non-life-threatening injuries. Both stabbings occurred along 13th Street North on October 23rd. Then on October 28th, officers observed a robbery on 5th Avenue and 13th Street North. The 57-year-old victim was confronted by 4 individuals who forcibly removed his backpack and assaulted him with a baton. Officers intervened and arrested 3 males and 1 female. 18-year-old Aiden William Kovacevic of Lethbridge is facing a long list of charges, including robbery and assault with a weapon. 18-year-old Raiden Kaisi Lee Manyfingers of Calgary is charged with robbery, and a 16-year-old Lethbridge male and a 15-year-old female are also facing charges. In the Middle East, there's a new indication that the Israel-Hamas ceasefire agreement is moving forward. British politicians and the family of Virginia Roberts Giuffre are praising the decision by King Charles to strip his brother Andrew of his remaining titles and his 30-room mansion. Here's a report from the Associated Press with more.
King Charles III is stripping his brother Prince Andrew from his remaining titles and evicting him from his royal residence. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said Andrew will be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and not as a prince, and he will move from his Royal Lodge residence into private accommodation. The move follows revelations about Andrew's relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Pressure had been growing on the palace to oust the prince from Royal Lodge after he surrendered his use of the title Duke of York earlier this month. Andrew has denied allegations that he had sex with 17-year-old Virginia Giuffre, who was trafficked by Epstein in 2001. Giuffre's posthumous memoir was published this month.
The banishment has left the disgraced royal increasingly exposed to political and legal scrutiny over his finances and his friendship with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. A rare white rhinoceros call is delighting everyone at the Cotswold Wildlife Park in England. Marcus is the 12th rhino calf to be born at the Burford site in 12 years. The park's team explained how rhino births in captivity are extremely rare, as just 5 white rhinos were born in total in European zoological collections in 2025. Catching the birth on video is also rare because white rhinos usually give birth at night. Marcus's birth brings the total number of rhinos currently residing at the park to 8, which keepers say is the highest number on show at any one time in the park's 55-year history. This Sunday, November 2nd, marks the annual fall time change. At 2 a.m., clocks will roll back 1 hour, giving everyone an extra hour of sleep. It also serves as a reminder to get ready for the colder days ahead. Chief Fire Marshal Troy Hicks from Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services encourages residents to take this opportunity to check and maintain their smoke alarms and prepare their homes for the winter season.
To make sure everyone checks their smoke detectors, their carbon monoxide detectors. You want to check to make sure they work. You want to, if you haven't changed the batteries, if you didn't do it in the spring, this is the time of year to remember to change your batteries. Another thing to remember about these detectors as well is we use the time changes. Also, just to remind people as well, you should be testing your detectors once a month. I know we all grew up with drying our mittens or drying different pieces of clothing on top of these heaters. It's not recommended. You get them on there, then you forget they're there. These things can combust, they can catch on fire. You want to make sure, if you can, have them plugged directly into a wall. I say all the time about trying to avoid the use of extension cords. Keep them 3 feet away from any combustibles like your curtains, shears, blankets, anything like that. When you get your furnace going, especially we'll talk like say a natural gas furnace or even electric heat, but specifically right now natural gas. If you're getting that going, make sure you've change your filter, especially if you have pets.
LFES also reminds families to keep safety in mind, including choosing costumes and decorations that are flame resistant and using battery-powered candles or glow sticks instead of open flames. Canadian pea growers face new challenges as India imposes a 30% tariff on yellow peas starting next month. The move wipes out another of the industry's top markets after China hit Canadian peas with a 100% levy in March. Saskatchewan Agriculture Minister Daryl Harrison is urging Ottawa to intervene immediately. Pulse Canada says the tariff has already driven prices down 43% since February. India says the move is meant to protect domestic farmers. Some Canadian producers say it could devastate their livelihoods. But according to the Federation of Agriculture, this is what they have been doing for decades.
From my experience over the years, India uses them tariffs to support their own market. So when they got enough peas to supply their own market, or a little bit where they get into an export position, they'll slap tariffs on everybody else to control the price product within their country, and that's the way they're basically keeping the price up to their producers. So they're using it as an ag program to a large degree, and they've done that for 30 years or so, as far as I can remember. They've always done, and it's basically used as a price stabilization method.
Canada's economy shrank by 0.3% in August, and weak growth is expected in the third quarter of the year. Statistics Canada reports goods-producing industries were down in August for the 5th time this year, while the services side contracted for the first time in 6 months. August's decline mostly offsets a gain of 0.3% in real GDP for July. The tariff-sensitive manufacturing industry declined by 0.5 percentage point, but an early look at September's real GDP figures show the sector might have rebounded last month. Restaurant Brand, owner of fast food chains like Burger King and Tim Hortons, says rising beef prices are eating into its profits. With more, here's Michelle Zedekian with the Canadian Press.
Rising beef prices are not just impacting the cost of your dinner, it's also been taking a toll on Burger King. Restaurant Brands, which owns Burger King, Tim Hortons, and Popeyes, says high beef prices are taking a bite out of its hamburger chain's profitability. Inflation data for September from both Canada and the U.S. shows beef prices were up double digits compared with last year. And Burger King just has to deal with it because beef is central to so many items on its menu. The chain would likely be hard-pressed to raise prices to account for the costlier beef because customers are so focused on value these days and would notice a price hike on the menu. The challenges at Burger King have left Tim Hortons to remain a bright spot in Restaurant Brands' earnings. The coffee chain saw its sales rise yet again in its latest quarter, particularly in its breakfast segment, which now offers scrambled eggs. Tim Hortons president Axel Schwan says with Tim's performing well, his goal is to be heads down to keep the good times going.
And now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 81 to 30,260. The Dow was up 40 to 47,562. The S&P 500 was up 17 to 6,840, and the Nasdaq was up 143 to 23,724. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 31 cents to $60.88 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 15 cents to $4.11 US. Gold was down 22.88 to $40.0173 US an ounce, and silver was down 30 cents to $48.65 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.21 per bushel. Barley is at $5.62. Canola is at $14.72, and corn is at $7.34 per bushel. Live cattle are up $1.32 to $236.60. Feeder cattle November contract was down $2.95 to $348.87. Lean hogs December contract was up 45 cents to 81.27, and the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 71.40 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Prime Minister Mark Carney met face-to-face with Chinese President Xi Jinping Friday. On the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea, Carney called the 40-minute meeting a turning point. Both leaders directed their officials to move quickly to resolve outstanding trade issues and irritants. Carney also accepted an invitation to meet again in China, although the date for the meeting has not been determined as of yet. As the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas seems to be holding by a thread, here in Canada, the Jewish community is feeling the sting of discrimination. What is it that is causing a rise in anti-Semitism? Rabbi Jared Grover of Beth Tikva Synagogue in Toronto shares his thoughts on this important issue. That interview is straight ahead. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews.